Chapter 9 of the leadership textbook is centered around the concept of public leadership. The chapter opens up with a quote by a famous leader in history, Napoleon Bonaparte. And it's a pretty simple quote, but it's pretty self-explanatory when it is, "A leader is a dealer in hope." And kind of take that as you want, but for me, I kind of grasp it as a leader can kind of only aspire to who they hope to be and kind of go off the hope of their followers. So the chapter opens up with the text describing what public leadership actually is. So it kind of goes off by stating off that public leadership is one of the most visible and dynamic forms of social influence. It describes it as the mix of activities that leaders use to influence public opinion, and that it will vary depending upon the needs of the group. Now, it then talks about a list of characteristics that are needed to increase organizational effectiveness. First one is being empowered. Second one is strategic management role. The next was issues management. The one that I thought was really kind of most important out of all of it was two-way communication, but then also symmetrical relationships, and those kind of go hand in hand and very important in both of their own specific aspects. Next, you have to be ethical, but then you also have to have supportive structure as well as positive relationship management. And all those are pretty self-explanatory when it comes to just kind of being a leader in general as well and being successful with that. But to be a public leader, you really have to hammer all those characteristics. So that led into the next thing, which was high-quality organizational public relationships are marked by. And that gives another list of kind of characteristics or things that those public relationships are marked by, which is control, mutuality, trust, satisfaction, commitment, exchange relationship, communal relationship, community involvement, but then also a reputation. And reputation is just pretty much you want to have like a good image of yourself and really don't want any negative backlash that can come about. And that's kind of one thing too that I've kind of seen of recently that's been such a big deal is you have to have a positive reputation moving forward. Today, especially with the internet, it's so easy to dig up dirt on someone and kind of find something about someone that you really don't want coming up, and you really want to have a clean slate and a good reputation to be an effective public leader and really kind of hammer the goals that you'd like to come about. So the next thing that the chapter leads into is developing effective speeches. So the first thing you have to do is pre-speech planning, and that's pretty much laying out everything. Personally, when I have to do a speech, I'll go ahead and give myself an outline, and then kind of do subcategories of the main points that I want to hit. It's really important to not have a long list of things, but just kind of a generalization, just so if you do lose your train of thought or you do kind of run off the deep end, you can kind of look at what you started out with and can kind of go from there. Next is the organization of the speech, and that kind of goes hand in hand with pre-speech planning, I feel like, because beforehand you can kind of organize how you want the speech to be done. Next is the language. You have to have positive, reassuring language, but then also, depending upon the type of speech that you're giving, you have to have it pretty much related to that. I mean, there's obviously different types of language you have to have. Next is rehearsal. You want to practice it a couple times, get it hammered in, just so when you're going up there and presenting, it's not the first time. Next is delivery. You want to be confident for it to be effective. You've got to really kind of know what you're doing and really kind of give that perception that people know what you're talking about too. And the next is responding to questions. You're not going to have to answer questions to every speech, obviously, but you want to hammer some of the questions that you do think will be addressed in your speech, as well as be prepared if there is like a Q&A section after your speech or after a presentation, that you are prepared and know how to answer some of those questions. So the next thing that the chapter leads into was the characteristics of successful campaigns. And the first one was pre-test messages and identify market segments. Next was to use the most accessible media for target groups. That leads into the using the media for raising awareness, but then also to rely on interpersonal communication, particularly communication between people of similar social backgrounds to lead to and reinforce behavioral change. You also want to use high credibility sources when it comes to backing up your information, but then also use direct messages as the individual needs of the audience, as well as varied message types. So the chapter then leads on to the different types of campaign stages when it comes to public leadership. First one being situation analysis, next being objectives, then strategies, budget, implementation, and evaluation. And then the chapter talks about a hierarchy of effects model, and those are a long list too, but those are exposure, attention, involvement, comprehension, skill acquisition, persuasion, memory storage, information retrieval, motivation, behavior, reinforcement of behavior and attitude, as well as post-behavior consolidation. So after all of that, it then talks about collaborative, otherwise known as integrative leadership. And that was also opened up with a quote by Kim Chandler McDonald, and that was to treat every connection, communication, and collaboration as part of a continuous relationship. So the attributes of a collaborative leadership are you have to have a collaborative mindset. Obviously, you have to be willing to work together with people. You have to be passionate. You have to have passion towards outcomes. A systems thinking mindset. You have to be open. You have to have good amount of openness, as well as be able to do some risk taking. You have to have a sense of mutuality and connectedness, but then also some humility. Bring you down to earth and really kind of give you that really personable feel. So that then leads into the skills that you have to be an effective leader for this style, and that was to have self-management. You have to have strategic thinking, as well as facilitation skills. And then the behaviors of a collaborative leader are you have to have stakeholder identification and assessment. You have to have strategic issue framing. You also have to have a relationship development with diverse stakeholders. You have to convene between working groups. That's kind of one that was expected, though, with collaborative. You also have to facilitate mutual learning processes, as well as inducing commitment. And then finally wrapping that up was facilitating trusting relationships amongst partners. So, yeah, that was pretty much collaborative as well as public leadership. It was a pretty interesting chapter, obviously. I think it kind of applies to a lot today. We see some of these public leaders. It's smart to kind of take note and see how they handle things in the public eye. So it was kind of cool to see this chapter put their actions to actual text that we're learning. So it's kind of cool to see it in reality.